So this video will be something very beneficial, I believe, for anyone who's planning on living or studying in Sweden at some point. Because my last video, it was my opinions on what I learned in my time there. But this is me asking actual friends who are Swedes and what they think people coming over should know before living or studying in Sweden. All the things I've listed and we'll talk about are things I agree with and have my own little opinions on. Stuff I would have been glad to know beforehand, and maybe some stuff I even did, but all very useful. All the points in this video will be different from the ones I said in my previous one that were my personal ones. I don't really want to overlap, except for this first one, which I kind of overlap because I just think it's really funny. The way my friend said it was much better than I think the way I said it, or just his words were great. What he said is, in Sweden, there's such a thing as comfortable silence. I don't want to talk about this too much because I already kind of did, but it's just saying that people like their private space and that's more of a norm there. Just because things are quiet, it doesn't mean it's necessarily awkward. Sometimes that's how people are most comfortable in Sweden. If you ever have a situation where you may feel like someone that you thought was nice was a bit rude because they kind of shut down the conversation or didn't look like they wanted to talk to you when they saw you on the street, it's not necessarily rudeness, it's just a difference of culture. Obviously, in general, people appreciate friendly, outgoing people when the situation's right. You know, if it's going out or if it's, you know, at some social event, something like that. Another Swedish friend of mine told me about how she really loved the outgoing Americans and how it's just different for her. So I'm not suggesting to be different or change your personality. Again, not every American person is outgoing, not every Swede is reserved, but you'll see the cultural differences sometimes, and it's not a bad thing. It's just something to be aware of and to keep in mind, and maybe not take a situation personally if it ever comes to that. Overall, I think just be who you are, be genuine is always the best thing. The next thing I want to mention that they reminded me to talk to you about is a word that may mean nothing to you now, but will become very relevant. Systembolaget. While I'm not promoting alcohol, it's something that people often have questions about, especially in the age range that people study abroad. So the Systembolaget is the government-run liquor store that they have in Sweden. Basically, the only place in Sweden that you can get liquor or any kind of alcohol above like 3.5%, which is really, really low, is at these government-run liquor stores. Unless you go out and you go to a bar and you know, do that stuff. In the city where I lived, in Kalmar, there was only two. And they have pretty strict hours, so something to be really aware of. You'll want to look it up when you get there and all, but I believe it's 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., Monday through Friday. Then on Saturdays, it's only open till 3 p.m., and then on Sundays, it's completely closed. So it can be really a bummer if you want to have, you know, dinner with wine with your friends or have a party or something like that and provide alcohol, and it's 3:10 on a Saturday, 3:10 p.m. on a Saturday, and you have to wait till next Monday morning to get anything. So something just to be aware of. Again, I'm not promoting heavy consumption of alcohol, just be smart about it and be prepared, I guess. The next thing they mentioned to me that's something that you all should know before going there is biking. It depends on what city you're in, of course. Some of the bigger cities might feel more car heavy, but overall, places like where I live and a lot of the cities where I visited, biking is such an efficient way to travel. Honestly, faster than cars most of the time, and obviously faster than walking. When I got to Sweden, I knew how to bike, and biking was something I did in my neighborhood with my friends, or more of a sport thing. It was never really a mode of transport for me. But man, did my opinion change on that. It became the pinnacle of transportation for me. Actually, the first thing I did when I moved back to San Francisco, after my semester abroad, was I bought a bike so I could take it to class every day. It's just a really cool way to commute. I really enjoyed it. Obviously, you're being healthy too at the same time, but you really get to see the city and feel like you're part of the city more than in a car where it feels more like a bubble. I'd really recommend looking into bikes when you get there. If they have some sort of bike rental system for students or like for a certain period of time, or if you can find a cheap bike or something like that. Another quick thing would be the scenery in Sweden. I think it's really beautiful. It's a pretty small country. It's not that hard to get from one side to the other. I mean, if you go all the way up north to Laplands, that's something else. But overall, if you stay in the more populated areas of Sweden, it's actually not that far from one place to another. The next big thing I want to talk about that a few of my friends actually mentioned to me, and I almost put it in my video, but I feel like it'd be more validated to put it in the opinions of locals, is the language. So I'm all for language learning. I'm actually learning a language right now. I think it's a really great thing for your mind and all that stuff. But the more and more I've gotten into language learning, the more I've realized you have to be really motivated and you have to have like a real reason to learn language, not just like impress people back home or just so you can have a conversation in a coffee shop. You usually need like some like real core motivation to drive you through, because it's usually a multiple year process to really learn the language. So I don't want to dissuade anyone from learning Swedish, but I just want you to be very conscious of how hard it is before you take that task on. I do think learning small things is great, you know, little conversation things, and that's great to show that you care, but just before you take on like a Swedish course or something like that, really think about it. Another thing that a few of my friends told me about is the cold, or more specifically the lack of sunlight that you'll get depending on what season you're there. If you're there in the winter, then lack of sunlight. If you're there in summer, I guess tons of sunlight, but I wasn't there that much of the summer. With the lack of sunlight, I'd recommend stocking up on vitamin D and just being aware of that. I mean, at 4 p.m. it's pitch black a lot of times in the winter time. You know, if you're only there one time, you know, during that winter for 3 months, I don't think it's that big a deal. And my last thing I want to say that they told me about was about school. This is the only one about school specifically. School tended to be much less structured in Sweden than what I was used to in the United States, where I'm much more used to consistent homework, attendance, and in Sweden it was much more about, you know, the final exam. There was really what felt like no reason to go to class if you could study on your own. There was occasional seminars, but the dangerous part about not feeling like you have to go to class is then you get way behind without realizing it. So it'd be super easy to skip class and all that stuff, but then it's all about you and if you can study it, and there's a lot of stuff you could potentially miss, or you will miss if you don't go to class. Just be aware of that. It may feel like you're getting an easy pass, it's a semester abroad, oh yeah, I get to do whatever I want, and then you realize, oh wow, people have been actually going to class and studying and doing all this stuff while I've been slacking off, and now I'm really behind. And there's no like homework grade or small quiz grade or attendance grade to help boost your grade. It's all about that final exam, or the 2 final exams, or like the midterm and then the final exam. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful for anyone who watched, and I'll leave my email below, or you can leave a comment if you have any questions, and hope you have a nice day and have a good time in Sweden.